I was thinking about this class. Usually when I finish the class, there are oftentimes I leave the class that night, I'm going, I didn't say that, or that, or that, or that. And one of the things I didn't say or didn't do, I alluded very quickly, but I didn't spend enough time on, which we'll do a little bit here. And that is, when we talk about the Trinity, we kind of went up to the Nicene Creed, the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed of 380. Remember that at all, the Nicene Creed? Yeah. And I kind of stopped there. That was on purpose. I didn't keep going through the centuries of the different creeds we had. Part of it's because I'm afraid you'd be so bored you would never come back, for real. But some people really care about that. And then I thought about doing a chart with all of them. I thought about different things. But anyway, so what I thought I'd do is just briefly let you know how the church kept talking about Trinity, and then we'll move on to it. But does that make sense? So basically, remember, just historically, it started with early Jews who thought Jesus was raised from the dead. They thought they experienced him in worship services. The Spirit came down. He said, well, he's not just a dude. What do we do with him? How do we talk about him? Well, he's God. Well, yeah, but he's not God the Father, because we know he's not God the Father. Well, how do we talk about him? And what they did, a couple things, just a quick review. They did a couple things. One thing, they said, well, we can call him God. They didn't do that often, because probably they didn't want to think you're God the Father, because he's not God the Father. Well, let's give him a title that we use for God the Father. And they did do that. Remember that title? It means boss or ruler. Remember? It's church. It starts with an L. Lord. Very good answer. So, Lord.
Capital L.
Capital L. Caps lock. Capital L. Capital O. Yeah. So Yahweh. They gave the name Lord. And so the Lord became a title. And so they would say things like, this is in Philippians 2. It's also in Hebrews when he says, and God gave him a name above all names. And most scholars think that means he called the title Lord. Well, Lord is what Yahweh is called in the Old Testament. So that's one way. How do we put Jesus in what Richard Bauckham calls the divine identity? One was, well, let's call him the same title, Lord. Another way, so we'll call him God sometimes, but he's not God the Father. We'll call him Lord. Another thing they'll do is to make Jesus sound like he's in the divine identity, is we will allude to and quote Old Testament Bible verses that sound like him, that only God did in the Old Testament, like walking on water, or my Lord said at my right hand from Psalm, and that was the number one cited thing for Jesus. So they did different things to talk about him. And that was all well and good because they're Jews trying to act like Jews and think and talk like Jews. And then, I told you by the end of the beginning of the 2nd century, Christianity moved from a Jewish religion to a chiefly Gentile religion. And so Old Testament Bible verses, allusions just didn't cut it much anymore. Not yet, they're coming. They didn't think that way. They spoke Greek, they spoke some Latin, and they were not steeped in Old Testament texts. They were a little bit, but not that much. And they were also bombarded with other Greek and Roman thinkers who said, this Christianity is nonsense. And so they wrote arguments against them called apologies. Apologia means a formal defense. And we talked about that in your handout. So Christian authors would write, no, God isn't like what you think. And they defended it. But as they did that, they kind of went more and more, as it were, out there. And they started bringing other vocabulary words to the table that are not in the Bible. Some are not, like ousia and homoousia, those kind of things. So they started debating back and forth. Remember I told you part of the problem was Latin speakers and Greek speakers had translation issues. They go back and forth. So by the time we get to the Council of Nicaea, it was a creed that was developed. A lot of councils or synods developed creeds. When it was finished, not much happened, about 50 years. Another council happened, and that council, they reinforced the former one and added a few more things to it. And that gets us up to the formal official called Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. And it's a full treatment. Then the church said, okay, we're all done of everything. We understand God next. That's not what happened. They said, well, okay. So the first question is this. How is the Father and Son related? Are they equals or not equals? That's basically the question they're trying to solve. And at Nicaea, and the two versions of the Nicene Creed, they settled that. So the answer is, are the Father and Son equal? The answer was, of course, a big fat yes. And so the way they talked about that was, as we said, it's in your handout, is that he's begotten, not made, true light of true light, like sunlight from the rays. Remember that talk a little bit? At all, it's in your handout. So he's the same equal. You can't say he's a creature. They say you cannot say there was a time when he was not, because that would mean he's a creature and creatures don't save. And then they would come back and say, no, he was before creation itself. Yeah, doesn't count. If he was created, he's a creature, creatures don't save. And so they came to the conclusion, the official stance of the Nicene Orthodoxy was they're equal, co-eternal, co-equal Father and Son. Then after another 50 to 100 years, another big thing that became a big topic was the nature of the Son, the nature of, we might say Jesus, but was he fully divine? I mean, we know he was human, but was he fully divine? They went back and forth on that. They finally came to a creed, the Athanasian Creed, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Is he fully divine? Yes. Actually, the word they use is truly divine or something like that. And then after a long time, they kind of settled on that, mostly. Then a lot of the churches, there was debate about, he was fully divine. Was he fully human? Was he truly human? At another creed. Again, this is a Cliff's Notes. I'm just trying to, this is, if you want to read more, I can give you all the works of it. So the answer is yes, he's fully divine. He's fully God-kind. And the next big fat thing was, he's fully human. People, they made arguments for both sides. No, he looked human. He's kind of human. Then another big debate was, is he a tertium quid? That is to say, is he a third kind of person? He's not, what's his nature? Is he human nature or God nature? Or is he a third kind of thing, a third kind of creature we never thought about? And that they said he is not tertium quid, that he is just, they would say, they said it in Latin, he's true God and true man. So he has a human nature and a divine nature. He has a human nature and a divine nature. Human and divine. Human and divine nature. And then later on, they started talking a whole lot about the Spirit. What about the Spirit? And this is where things, by this time, we're getting pretty late in the centuries. Now, they brought the Spirit here and there, but the Son issue were the big topics. Really, really big topics. By the time that's all basically settled by the early 4th century, early 5th century. By the time you get to then the Spirit comes up. That talk is a big deal. And this is where I will say just very briefly, there was one major. Can you read that up? Let's see. There became a big debate on basically the origin of the Holy Spirit, the origin. And so in the creed in Latin, they would see this spirit, and that the Spirit proceeds from the Father et filioque, which in Latin means and the Son, et filioque. And the church was divided on this. Does the Spirit proceed from the Father alone, or does the Spirit come from the Father and the Son? And in general, the Western church that spoke Latin, think Rome, Italy, northern Egypt, they said Father and Son, et filioque. The Eastern Greek-speaking church said, just from the Father alone. And this became one of the reasons why the entire Eastern Greek Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church split in 1031. This is one of the reasons why over this theological issue, was whence the Spirit comes. There's other reasons too, like the Crusaders demolished Constantinople. I mean, it was horrible. But one of the theological reasons why they did is because they could not agree on the origin of the Spirit. Does the Spirit come from the Father or the Father and the Son? That et filioque expression, that phrase, is a biggie if you talk to Orthodox people or Roman Catholics. So this takes you about roughly 1,000 years to, roughly. The Father and Son issues are in the early 3rd century, so roughly 800 years or so. And that's, think about that. It's close to 1,000 years of Christians going back and forth and trying to figure how to say it, how to talk about it. And then what do we say about him? So I'm going to pause there briefly. We can go on, you could explore all the authors and all the creeds, but any questions or comments about this?
Can you repeat all that?
Yes. All right, from the very beginning. That's right.
Just kidding.
Yeah. In a nutshell. And that's why, so as we read this article now as a Trinityological blunder, some of this talk will come up and it'll make sense. So let's go through this together if we can. And if you have any questions, any comments, you can just throw your hand or say something, okay? Is that okay? Just talk to me. Paul Copan, the author, is a PhD. He's a Christian philosopher. I think he still teaches at West Palm Beach Atlantic in Florida. And he's a Christian philosopher, does a lot of apologetics for Christianity. He's a bright guy. He says, any Christian who has interacted with Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, will eventually hear questions such as, how can God be three in one? Or if Jesus was God, to whom was he crying out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Unfortunately, in our age of vanishing biblical literacy, the average Christian's understanding of the Trinity is minimal or even heterodox. Heterodox means against orthodoxy. You might say false. This ignorance is tragic for several other reasons. Many fail to recognize Christianity's unique doctrine of God. They are therefore unable to defend Christian orthodoxy, and they perhaps are not being assisted within the Christian community to worship God in truth, John 4:24. First, Trinitarian distinguishes the Christian faith from other versions of theism, Judaism and Islam, which are Unitarian. That's exactly right. Unitarian, they do not believe in Trinity. So I have my little commentary. I'm just saying, when you hear people say, well, all religions basically believe the same thing. All religions basically, that is fundamentally false. And if you told a Muslim all religions, that is offensive to them. I'm a Christian, I get over it. But they'd be like, no, we do not. Allah alone, we do not all believe the same thing. Many Christians seem unaware of this unique and central tenet of the faith in the triune God as Father, Son, and Spirit. And second, Christians tend to be inept at responding to anti-Trinitarian thought from Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons. Many are incapable. And I'll go down a little bit. Third, the Christian's worship is uninformed, misguided of this doctrinal interest. I have heard elders and pastors thank the Father for dying on the cross or for the Holy Spirit as it. Me too, by the way. And that's not Trinitarian theology. Challenges exist not only within the church, but also outside of it. Post 9/11, we commonly hear slogan, Christians and Muslims worship the same God. Yes, Arab Christians use the term Allah for the triune God long before the time of Muhammad, and many of them still do. By the way, let that sink in. Allah is just Arabic for God. Allah is just Arabic for God. It doesn't mean Muslim God. It's just Arabic, the language. So Christians who speak Arabic have been calling Allah for a long, long time. So is Allah the same God? We always say, well, if it's a Christian saying the word, we're referring to the same God.
It's easier to delineate, though, if we think of Muhammad's God as Allah.
Correct. And that's why I say, if you're talking to a Christian who speaks Arabic, yes, we're talking about the same Allah. If you're talking to a Muslim, we're not talking about the same God. We're either both wrong, but we can't both be right. We can't be. That's not how truth. This is called the rule of excluded middle. You can't say God is Trinitarian or he's not Trinitarian at the same time. One of them's, that's right. We had to make a distinction. And that's okay to say that. We just disagree. We fundamentally disagree. Muslims reject the triunity of God as heretical and blasphemous. It's called shirk when you describe partners to God. That's exactly what it's called. It's blasphemous. You cannot attribute divinity to any other person, not just human person, but person besides Allah alone. You're Unitarian. That's shirk. In fact, I did a podcast where I argue that according to the New Testament, Jesus commits shirk. Shirk. When he says, are you the son of the Father? He says, I am. You will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds. And they rip that's shirk. He's blasphemous. So I've told the Muslims, but what do you do with that? Because you say you believe the Gospels, but he committed it. But no, he's a great prophet. In other words, it doesn't go together. He didn't commit. But in their view, yeah, he did. And then you have, of course, new atheists like Richard Dawkins, who's a well-known atheist. And he says this, rivers of medieval ink, not to mention blood, have been squandered over the mystery of the Trinity and in suppressing deviations such as the Arian heresy. Arius of Alexandria in the 4th century denied that Jesus was consubstantial, that is, of the same substance or essence with God. What on earth could that possibly mean, you are probably asking? Substance? What substance? What exactly do you mean by essence? Very little seems the only reasonable reply. Now, which is another staggering thing to me when people write about stuff, and he has zero specialty in the area. He's a biologist, an evolutionary biologist. It's just crazy. I would never write on evolution biology. And I don't know, hubris? I don't know the best word, arrogance to write things. That's sad. It's embarrassing. If you said that at a professional meeting, Okay, to add such challenges, popular Western culture tends wrongly to assume that God refers to a supreme person. Not a few Christian philosophers, I'll mention names, have referred to God as a person. And that's correct. This is misleading. That's right. He's not a person. Three persons, Father, Son, and Spirit, fully share in one true God's identity. From eternity, there has existed not one solitary person, that's Islam, but God in relation, three divine persons fully and loving, enjoying one another. Personal relationships do not come into existence when God created finite personal beings, like angels and humans. Relationship has always existed in this triune divine family. Christians should not think of God apart from his self-revelation as triune, and this should inform us in our worship of God and our life of the world. And unlike many philosophical conceptions of God as holy, other, unmoved mover, first cause, ground of all being, these are very common in philosophy, by the way, if you don't know that, in Aristotle. The Christian understanding rejects such non-relational abstractions in favor of a God who is personal, intrinsically relational, and history engaging. This tri-personal God, though overall transcendent, is also in all immanent and not far from each one of us. Acts 17:27. And when Paul's talking about Areopagus, he's not far from us. So Copan, I think I completely concur with him. We've heard it mistakenly said several times. Now, one more time, I'm not beating on people who are ignorant. And ignorant just means without knowledge. So if you're ignorant, you're not a heretic if you're ignorant. And people make mistakes, they say the wrong thing, they learn from people they respected. That doesn't make you no! We should be the word police all the time. But if a person knows what the truth is and they deliberately go against it on purpose, that's heterodoxy, that's heresy. So as Christians, he's right, we need to be informed. Not only because Christians need to be informed, we need to worship God in truth, the real God who is. And that matters a lot to me. But see, I'm married to Elaine, and I think she's 6 foot tall and blue eyes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you even know your wife? I want to worship God, the true God who is, as best I understand him. So I want to know. But secondly, we're getting attacked from the outside. That's a bunch of stupid nonsense. You Christians are trying, man, 3 and 1, 1 and 3, you can't add up. And so Christians ought to have something to say about that. And we do have something to say about it. And that's, so I agree with it. And this should a little bit a review, I hope. Okay, the Athanasian Creed around 500. Now that's around here, around the human divine part of my board. It attempts to make sense of the biblical data that affirm God's threeness and oneness. So here's the Athanasian Creed. Now the Catholic faith, that's the universal faith, is that we worship one God in Trinity and unity, neither confounding the persons nor dividing the substance. Confounding the persons means we don't get them all confused with the same person. We're not. No. And we don't divide the substance. There's one being. But there's one person of the Father, another of the Son, another of the Holy Spirit. But the Godhead of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit is one. The glory equal, the majesty co-eternal. And yet not three eternals, but one eternal. As also not three infinites, nor three uncreated, but one uncreated and one infinite. That's God. God is uncreated and infinite and eternal. One being. That is God. That's the Christian God. So likewise, the Father is almighty, the Son's almighty, the Holy Spirit's almighty. And yet not three almighties, but one almighty. So the Father is God, the Son God, and the Holy Spirit God. And yet not three gods, but one God. For like as we are compelled by Christian truth to acknowledge every person by himself to be both God and Lord, so we are forbidden by the universal religion to say there will be three gods or three lords. So there's one Father, not three fathers, one Son, not three sons, one Holy Spirit, not three Holy Spirits. Okay, well, keep unpacking that. In the history of Christianity, the Western Church, that's Catholic and Protestant, has stressed God's unbreakable oneness of God's being, whereas the Eastern Orthodox has emphasized the distinctiveness of the three persons. And that's also created problems. The Western people, like us, Latin speakers, and then all the way eventually English speakers and so forth, they tend to focus on, don't forget it's monotheism. And the Eastern Church speaks Greek. They said, don't forget it's three persons. And that pendulum swing kind of goes back and forth. Now that said, Orthodox Christian formulations of the Trinity should attempt to avoid overemphasizing or denying one of three Trinitarian fundamentals. Doing so could lead to doctrinal significant error. So this is universally common in church work in my life right here. You either overemphasize threeness, that leads to tritheism, and that's like polytheism, they're many gods. Do you see that theism? This error, which is found in one version of Mormonism, denies God's oneness. And that is true. The LDS or Mormons, they don't think they're not Trinitarian. They're three different gods. That's tritheism. It's not Christian. You overemphasize oneness, that's modalism, that God is just one person who appears in different modes. That's why it's called modalism. It's called by many names. Father in the Old Testament, Son in the New Testament, Spirit in the church age. I've heard people say that. But I told you before, like Pentecostals, there's a branch of Pentecostals called Oneness Pentecostals, and that's what they believe. That there's the Father and the Son and Spirit are all the same God, and I think that's false and unconvincing, but they would say that. This Unitarian, as opposed to Trinitarian view of God, is characteristic of much liberal theology, which, for example, rejects Jesus' divinely authoritative status. It denies God's threeness. That's right, Jesus was a good dude or something like that. But it is modalism. Rejecting equality leads to subordinationism. In this case, the three persons don't possess alike the divine nature, but are a kind of hierarchy. According to Jehovah's Witnesses, the Father alone is God, Jesus is a God, and the first creature God made, and the Holy Spirit is not personal, but of a force. This subordinationist error undermines the equality. So instead of the Father, Son, and Spirit being on the same plane, there's the Father way up here, and the Son's beneath him, and the Spirit's just this gooey, smoky force. In my experience in life, across, is it five denominations I've worked, it's this third option is by far the most common. Is by far the most common. So they'll say things like, when you pray to God and Jesus, and then you feel it. What's it? You know, the Spirit just moves. Or I've heard it in prayers, sermons, songs. It's by far the most common. And it's by default heresy. If the person knew what they were talking about, it's false. They don't know better. Most of them don't know better, but that's the thing.
And they say that Jesus is created.
That part, they usually don't know that. They'll say he's like a Superman person. I think a lot of people, they don't know the vocabulary, but there's a lot of belief that, in my experience, an assumption, implication that what we call adoptionistic theology, that when Jesus was baptized, he was adopted as God the Father's Son. Like, skadoosh, now you have special powers. And that's when he became a real special person. When they don't know better, that's what I've heard. But there's certainly the sense of subordination. God, the Father is the real God. And then there's lowercase g, God, Jesus. But he's more like a Superman. And if people really think that, like he looks human, it's back to this, is he fully human? A lot of people would say no. If you shot him with a bullet, it'd bounce off his eyeball. I mean, he's Superman. He called on angels any second and zap people. He just chooses not to. And so when he says things like, even the Son doesn't know when the end of time comes in Mark 13, though, he didn't really mean that. He knows everything all the time. Or when the woman in the hemorrhages blood touches him, and he says, who touches me? He didn't mean that. He just wants her to fess up because he's not human at all. He can't be ignorant. He can't be that kind of stuff.
Does that religion have a different Bible?
Oh, no, ma'am. It's the Christians. Yeah.
Well, what do they say when it says, I only say and do what my Father says and does?
Yeah, good question. So like in John's, yeah, what I only do and say my Father does. I guess they'd probably say, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's what happens because he's he's still like, they wouldn't articulate this way because they don't not very articulate, but if I forced them on, they'd probably say, well, sure, he's like lowercase g God, or he's God, yeah. They kind of do that. Yeah, he's God. But it's not the sense of co-eternal, right, co-equal. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, again, that's just, y'all may never experience this. To me, when I grew up as a child myself, this was my dominant view for a long time. And I grew up in Baptist churches. And it was the way you talk about it. The way you talked about God, the Father, Son, and Spirit. When you talked, it was just very different. Spirit wasn't it. Sometimes people didn't mean to, but you never know where it's going. And that's not New Testament. In John's Gospel, John 3, he says the Spirit comes, you never know where he's going. So anyway, okay, so he's right. So these are three dangers. Emphasizing threeness to where now you're like a tritheist, emphasizing oneness too much where you're a Unitarian like a Muslim, or emphasizing subordination, and that's not Christian either. By contrast, the Orthodox doctrine of Trinity emphasizes that only one God exists, there's oneness, exists eternally in three distinct persons, Father, Son, and Spirit. There's threeness, and they're fully equal in their essential divine attributes and perfections. That's equality. There we go. Now, from eternity, the triune God has existed. The self-sufficient Trinity of Father, Son, and Spirit have existed in their free, mutual self-giving and self-receiving love. Relationship or communion is intrinsic to this household. And typically we call the Latin word economy. This household or economy, this relationship, communion, divine persons, though distinct from one another, are inseparably united in other-oriented love. This divine inner connection of mutuality, openness, reciprocity, has no individualistic competition among the family members, but only joy, self-giving love, and transparency. Rather than being some isolated self or solitary ego, God is supremely relational in his self-giving, other-oriented nature. Within God is intimate union as well as distinction, as unbreakable communion of persons. The persons of the Godhead can be distinguished but not separated. God is both community and unity. So those things go together. Hey, look. And on page 209, if there's a hand up behind you. Although some analogy of the Trinity can be problematic, like water's three states, which implies modalism. I told you that last time. Remember that? The ice and water and vapor. They can't be three molecules simultaneously. It's either ice or vapor. That's modalism. That's like either God is either the Father or the Spirit, and that's not good. But they're problematic. Other analogies are helpful, and then he talks about Cerberus, and I told you that last time in the handout. I gave a little pretty picture. It's a single organism, a substance. There's one dog, not three dogs. He has three distinct centers of awareness or consciousness of the same canine nature. In the world, we have comparable analogies in, say, two-headed snakes, or even inseparable. He should not have said Siamese twins. That's a common mistake. It's conjoined twins. Siamese is the nationality. I mean, anyway, people still. So, and I told that example. I forgot he gave it too. But a conjoined twin is like that. Likewise, God is one immaterial soul or substance with three distinct centers of consciousness: rationality, will, and agency, who are deeply and necessarily interconnected, and they share the same unique divine nature. Because the relation of God exists and chooses to create humans in his image, relationality is central to our identity as humans. No wonder the Ten Commandments divide into two tables: our relationship to God and relationship to fellow human beings. Jesus himself summarizes our twofold duty to love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. We have been made for communion with God first and foremost, but how we regard fellow human beings reflects our spiritual condition. We recognize what love is by the model of his self-giving God in Christ. And so there the point, of course, is making is the Trinity is community. The Trinity is in love. Father, Son, Spirit are in equal love to each other. No wonder we're made to love. It's by, back to 1 John 4. God is love. It's just, and the triune God loves. Christians have long pondered the mystery of the Trinity. We're not here to demystify the God whose nature and purposes can't be reduced to tidy formulas. That's right. We should celebrate the unfathomable God, who's under no obligation to human demands to clarify everything about himself. And why think our puny minds can grasp secret things anyway? That's exactly right. Paul reminds us that we know partially and lack the clarity. Remember, he says that now we see in a glass dimly. He means a mirror, because they would shine up bronze or metal and you see a little mirror. He said, but there we'll see face to face. There we'll see face to face. The great things of the gospel, as Jonathan Edwards said it, are astonishing, but mystery or partial knowledge doesn't imply contradiction. That's exactly right. And I've heard this before many times through the years is, see, it's a problem, all you thinkers. You just want to, there's a mystery. You're just trying to figure him all out. And you shouldn't do that. My response is, and many people's response is, no, we're not trying to figure him all out. We are trying to know him well. And God, why do that? Because God wants us to know him. It's called revelation. He's revealed himself. I want to get to know him. Perfect. So if a person thinks trying to get to know a person means I'm trying to limit him, that doesn't logically follow. That makes no sense. I really, really want to know my wife. Well, you shouldn't limit her. I mean, who said I'm limiting her? I'm trying to get to know her. Well, the more you get to know her, somehow it makes her smaller. That means I know more of her. I mean, that doesn't follow. God doesn't become smaller because I know him. But is it true I can know everything about God right now? Of course not. Of course not. Just of course not. Unless he reveals to you everything about himself, go for it. Let me know all that. Write a book. So there's so much we don't know about him, of course. But there's nothing wrong with Christians going, yeah, but I want to try to get to know him better. He's Trinity. And if something's a mystery, we don't throw our hands up and go, mystery equals nonsense. Mystery doesn't equal contradiction. Why does Elaine like Diet Coke as much as she does? It's a mystery, Sue. That doesn't mean she's a walking contradiction. It's just a mystery. That's the same thing with God. That's what atheists will say. You throw your hands up in despair. It's a mystery. See, it's all nonsense. That doesn't follow. It doesn't mean it's nonsense. It means I don't know. It just means I'm ignorant. He hasn't revealed it. That's all that means. But if it is a contradiction, that's a big deal. because that means Christianity is false. If at the core of our faith is a logical contradiction, it means it's nonsense, and we should call it nonsense. I don't think it's nonsense, which is why I'm still a Christian, but mystery does not mean nonsense, and that's what. I'm going to go ahead a little bit. Well, I'll read a little bit. Here's a good example. Unitarians. Okay. I'm in that third sentence. Classical New England Unitarians who stress the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the neighborhood of Boston, and their ilk have suggested that Christians just can't count. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. Anthropologist Pascal Boyer, a naturalist who claims that religion is simply a matter of brain function and survival enhancement, that's very common, by the way, is disdainful of religious believers. He claims that they don't think critically, don't check out evidence, and believe what can't be falsified. He adds that Christians seem particularly gullible and can't think correctly. Boyer specifically mentions the irrational doctrine of the Trinity. As it turns out, Boyer himself isn't displaying the appropriate critical thinking and evidence checking he claims believers are lacking. Ironically, he presents a doctrine that no Orthodox Christian believes, that 3 persons are 1 person. That's true. Nobody thinks that. Not an educated, nobody, none of the creeds say what it is. No, the Christian believes that there are 3 necessarily inseparable persons, not 1 person, who share one divine nature and substance. So without trying to reduce God to human formulas and grids, how can we in faithful humility better grasp it? So here are some examples, and hopefully this is a good bit of review. First, Scripture reveals both a oneness to God and a 3ness. And we have biblical examples of the praying, Lord our God, the Lord is one. And that Jesus, there's one Lord, 1 Corinthians 8:4-7. There's no one but God. There's one. It's always one. Jews and Christians always thought God is one, period. But God's 3ness is also apparent. Remember the Father, Son, Great Commission. Get baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. And not the names of the Father, and the authority, the equal authority of Father, Son, Spirit. And it's not subordinated to God the Father, and I guess Jesus, and that it Spirit. No, it's not that way. And in Jesus' baptism, remember, the Father is there and the Spirit comes down. And I love 2 Corinthians, Paul says, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. So the early Christians, one more time, they said, we think there's still 3 different persons. Second, to 1, but in 3. Second, God is 1 in essence or nature, but 3 in person. Now, 3 and 1 aren't in contradiction here. To be in conflict, the same category or relationship must be involved. That's exactly right. But 3ness pertains to persons. 1ness pertains to nature. I said this last week, and this is common. 3 persons is the who. Nature is the what. It's 3 who's and 1 what. If I were to say there's 3 who's and 1 what, three who's and 1 do, that's contradiction. You've changed categories, 3 who's and 1 what. So I have a conjoined twins. There's 2 who's, Sue and Jan, but 1 body. What are they? They're human, but there are 2 hues up there. I can have a conversation with 2 different people attached to the same body. So 3 who's, 1 what. There isn't 1 divine nature and 3 divine natures. Nope. 3 persons and 1 or 1 person. Nope. So it's 3 persons and 1 nature, essence. A nature is what makes a thing or person what it is. For example, God has certain characteristics that make him who he is and what he is. He can't not exist. He can't. He has what's called aseity. But he has to exist. That's what it means to be God. And is all good, for example. He's not kind of good. Just as Earth's billions of humans possess a common nature that sets them apart from angels and aardvarks, the triune persons are equally and fully God, sharing the same nature, though at a much deeper, more unified level than humans. Now, crucial to overcoming the contradiction charge in the doctrine of Trinity is distinguishing between the only 1 divine nature and 3 persons who possess it. There aren't 3 gods, but 1. And you might pause there and say, well, David, what are those divine natures? What are those characteristics of God? And that's where theologians start disagreeing. They do. So what does it mean to be God? And philosophers, they've always, I'm saying it a positive way, they've never fully agreed. Some would say, well, 1 has to be a deity, that is necessary existence. They all agree on that. They probably all agree that he has to be all good. They probably, so then you start getting, they're called great making properties by Anselm. Then you say, well, all-knowing, is that 1? Is omnipresent 1? And if the answer is yes, then what do you do with Jesus? Because he was not all present while he was in Galilee. They would say, well, then he's no longer God. So when you start giving characteristics to make God God, if Jesus or the Spirit doesn't fit it, well, then he's out. Do you see the problem there? And that's what becomes problematic. And that's where people will say, well, no. What happened then was when Jesus in Philippians 2, they'll say, when he emptied himself, he lost some of those divine attributes. And others come back and say, no. Easy there, bub. He can't lose any of the divine attributes. He's no longer God if that happens, which means he's not the God man. He's not true God, true human anymore. That's what people said. He was a true God, true human, not on earth. And others come and no, he has to have been. Yes, he was. Because who forgives sins but God alone? And they come up with different answers. And if you want, we can talk more about that. But that's why how you define the nature of God matters. You're welcome. So what I do is I go to the biblical view. So the ancient Jews didn't bring up omnipresence, omni. They didn't. That's Latin. What Jews would say, and I already told you, remember that big black line? Only God creates. Only God judges. Only God kind of rules over all. Basically, there's only like 3 or 4 Jews would say only God does. And they would say Jesus at all times does those things, or at least has the capacity to do those things, or something like that. But they just don't have the same. They're not speaking philosophy in the New Testament. They're just not. That's not their concern. When Jehovah's Witnesses or Muslims ask Christians, if Jesus was divine, to whom did he cry, my God, why have you forsaken me? These questioners assume that if Jesus is God, then it is impossible that another can share the same divine nature. We can reject this without inconsistency and even respond, if the Father is God, to whom is he speaking when he says to the Son, your throne, O God, is forever? Or you, Lord, lay the foundation of the earth. Hebrews 1, 8, and 10. You see the assumption? Well, if Jesus is God, then who's he talking to? You say, no, wait a second, you misunderstood. Jesus has God, he's God kind. The Father is God kind. The Spirit's God kind. So to whom was Jesus speaking? God the Father. Right? Because they're all God kind. But Muslims don't agree with that. Jehovah's Witnesses don't either. That doesn't make any sense to them. It does to Christians. Third, to distinguish between person and nature, we must keep in mind the 2 ways we use is, Bill Clinton. Identity versus predication. Mark Twain is the pen name for Samuel Langhorne Clemens, right? Right, Mark Twain. The 20 cigars a day smoker and author of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. 26 cigars a day? Is that for real? Every time I read that, that's hard. 26 a day? Twain does not have characteristics that Clemens does not have. So Twain does not have characteristics that Clemens does not have. Or they're the same person. In other words, when we say Samuel Langhorne Clemens is Mark Twain, we can just as easily reverse the names. Mark Twain's and Samuel Langhorne Clemens. Now, each of those statements indicates identity. Mark Twain equals Samuel Langhorne Clemens and vice versa. The names, which refer to the same person, are fully interchangeable and thus identical. When it comes to the Trinity, I love this part. To say Jesus is God isn't identical to God is Jesus. Unlike the Mark Twain example, Jesus doesn't exhaust what it means to speak of God. Jesus and God are not identical. According to the Bible, Father and Spirit are called divine just as Jesus is. In the statement, Jesus is God, we use it to describe or predicate, not to identify or equate. Jesus is God in that he shares in the nature of that only other 2 persons share. There's just one person who can probably be called God. So that's why you've heard me say every single time, I don't say Jesus is God ever. I say Jesus is God kind. That's why I say that. Because in most Christians, when they hear Jesus is God, they're not thinking, David's predicating there. They think, oh, Jesus is God, the being. No, Jesus is not God, the being. Jesus is God, the Son. Jesus is not the being God. God is the being God. God the Father, Son, Spirit is the being. Jesus is God kind. Father is God kind. Spirit is God kind. Is that? No one's saying anything. So are you following me or is this too fast? You okay? I think Dave fell asleep or crying. I can't tell what's... You can cry. You know why? Because it's your birthday. It's my party. You're welcome. There you go.
Yeah.
We're not done yet. We're going to sing. Don't worry. Again, threeness pertains to persons and oneness pertains to nature or essence. There's only one divine nature, but 3 persons share in it. For God to be God, he must possess certain qualities or properties, being all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good. Only Father, Son, and Spirit participate in the divine nature and thus can be called God. Each of these 3 persons is also a center of consciousness. responsibility, and activity, and is a distinct from the other. For example, Jesus isn't the Father isn't the Spirit. There's simply no logical contradiction when Christians say three persons, one divine nature. That's exactly right. There is no contradiction. There's different categories. Three whos, one what. There's a different category altogether. There's no contradiction. Fourth, the members of the Trinity share the same being, not simply the same nature. That is, God is one substance or substantia that exists or subsists on its own. God is his own self-contained entity. The triune God isn't a mere assemblage of divine beings. That's polytheism. He's not three gods who hang out a whole lot. It's not like that. Who happen to have a common purpose. Think back to the analogy of the three-headed Cerberus. The three centers of consciousness exist or are contained in one organism, a self-contained being. In the case of God, a personal being, we have three persons who similarly exist in one soulish being. God is not three beings, but one. Just as one head of Cerberus is not a being, so none of the persons of the Trinity is a being. Just as one of the dog's heads cannot exist apart from the connection with the other two in a single organism, likewise none of the persons of the Trinity can exist in being without the other. So this is radically different from polytheism or tritheism, in which we have distinct beings that are capable of existing on their own. The necessary unity of Father, Son, and Spirit is like the angles of a triangle. If we remove one angle, we no longer have a triangle. All three must be in place. Because there's one being. So you say, well, let's get rid of the Spirit. It's an it. Now it's just Father, Son, and an it. Nope, no longer God. That's what Christians would say. You no longer understand who God is in the Christian faith. You cannot get rid of him. We'll just delete him. No. He's died. Nope, doesn't work. It cannot happen. Fifth, does that make sense? So move ahead. Yeah, makes okay. Fifth, the triune persons are deeply interrelated or mutually indwell one another, sharing a necessary, unbreakable relational oneness. This got a little confusing for a while because the terms they started using in the Greek and Latin, this became a real big deal to them. And I'll unpack this as best I can. We earlier noted that humans possess a common nature. You and I have the same nature as Socrates and Plato. This nature makes us what we are, human. When it comes to God, we need further clarification. Though I share the same human nature with, say, my students, they are separate and distinct from me. It's possible for me to exist without them, or vice versa. The members of the Trinity, however, are inseparably related. One can't exist without the other two. And as we've seen, a triangle can't exist if we take one of its angles, since by definition a triangle is triangular. Likewise, God by definition is triune. Unlike Unitarians, we can't have just the Father without the Son or Spirit. The triune persons are necessarily and permanently interrelated. Now, Greek theologians use the term perichoresis and Latin circumcision. See, that's where it gets. To describe the Trinity's necessary interrelationship. Perichoresis, necessary relationship. Jesus spoke of being in the Father and the Father in him. In John 10, and that's what Sue referenced earlier about, I only do what my Father does. He talks about in the Father in him. There's a mutual abiding in the Godhead. Unlike human relationships, however close they may be, right? Elaine doesn't dwell in me, and I don't dwell in her. She say, yes, I do. You're my soul. The relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit is not some miscellaneous collection of distinct persons who just happen to share some generic divine essence, godness, so they can be classed together. Rather, they mutually, inseparably share in the life of one another in a remarkable way. A life without isolation, insulation, secrecy, or fear. They enjoy a penetrating, transparent, mutual knowledge of the other, as co-other, and as loved other. So while the divine persons each fully possess the same nature, each one can rightly be called God, or I would say God-kind, more fundamental is they're sharing a common, mutually indwelling, unbreakable life together. And again, I think of conjoined twins. Like you can't, let's imagine you cannot take them apart. It just doesn't happen. They interrelated, perichoresis. Consider the analogy of the mutual interaction of the soul and the body. The scriptures speak of a deep unity between the body and soul. The body interacts continually and deeply with the soul, and the soul with the body. If I feel nervous in my soul, my stomach starts churning. If I cut off my arm, my soul must make certain adjustments in light of this loss. There's a mutual indwelling or interdependence in this body-soul relationship. The soul may temporarily separate from the body at death. The believer is absent from the body, he's at home with the Lord. But there's normally a deep interactive unity between them. They act as one. That's true. So they get around each other, they interact. Very much so. And when they do, there's a deep unity. 6, because the members of the Trinity share the same essence and mutually indwell one another, they also act as one and not in isolation from one another. All that the three divine persons do, they do as one, whether creating, revealing, or redeeming. The The three persons of the Trinity necessarily act as one. For example, when God creates, Father, Son, and Spirit are involved. Or when Jesus is raised from the dead, he is said to be raised by the Father and the Spirit. But Jesus declares that he has authority not only to lay down his life, but to take it up again. He does. Only one place in John 2:19 he says, and I will raise it up. Tear down this body, I'll raise it up. The persons of the Trinity also indwell believers. John 14, Romans 8. Even though each person has a distinct center of awareness or consciousness and a distinct will, only one harmonious will is expressed in divine action. Rather than acting as three independent persons, as with Greek and Roman gods, each member of the Godhead is equally present in every divine action. So again, if you pray to the Holy Spirit, the Spirit didn't go, what are you talking about? You were talking to Jesus last time. You didn't tell me anything about that. Well, can I pray to the Spirit and the Spirit understands God the Father? Can God? Yes, you can pray. They're all in cahoots. They all work together. God's relational. He's relating within us himself. He's relational toward us. This is God for us. He has created us to love him, to cling to him, like a husband and wife must cling to each other, Genesis 2:24. When God came to this planet, he sat at tables with the marginalized and outcasts of society, showing God's deep interest in them. When the Spirit brings us into God's family, he pours God's love into our hearts, giving us the confidence that we're God's adopted children. These three divine persons are one in at least 5 important ways. So 3 divine persons are one in 5 ways. 1, they share the same being. Compare a 3-headed Cerberus. They're all the same being. They share the same divine nature. They're all equally God-kind. 3, they mutually indwell one another, being bound together in relationship, patakolesis. 4, they necessarily act in perfect harmony. 5, and one harmonious will is expressed in their actions. So that's a summary of what we just read. As we look at the story of Scripture, we can gather that first, only one God exists, and second, 3 persons can be called God. The Holy Trinity is indeed a mystery, but not an incoherent one. Okay, let me quiz you then. Define patakolesis. No, let me quiz you. Let's just practice. So again, just for your own sake, if someone asks you. So do you Christians, what's that Trinity something? What's it called?
Trinity.
Trinity. Oh, Trinity. What does Trinity mean? Explain that to me. It's like 1, 1, 1 plus 1 equals 1. I don't understand. What is that?
3 beings as 3 persons.
Good. I'm glad you didn't see my eyes.
I'm not looking at you.
Yeah. So 3 beings. No.
Trinity.
Trinity. Trinity means what?
Three
Come on.
persons, one divine nature.
Yeah, one essence. Yeah, so 3 persons in one being.
3 substantial persons.
One being.
One divine.
Being. So that's right. So one being in 3 persons. Good. So 3 persons and one being. You say, what do you mean nature? Say more about that. So they share a nature? What does that mean?
They have the same divine nature.
They have the same divine nature. Like what?
Well,
Being bound together in relationships.
They're all equally bound together in a relationship. They are eternally in a relationship forever. What are some characteristics of God? Like they're all
Holy.
They're all holy. Creatures are not. Only He is.
Act in perfect harmony.
They work in harmony. What's a characteristic, though, of that nature? Come on, this is church. God is
Loving.
God is love, so they're all equally the nature, divine nature. They are perfectly loving, perfectly good. All 3 of that, they're all to share the exact same qualities.
We have to have all 3 of them.
And you have to have all 3 of them. What's a good analogy if you like that? You got to have all 3 of them.
Like a pyramid.
Like a pyramid, that's right. Or just like a pyramid, which has many, many, many corners. Like a triangle. Take away one of them, it's no longer a triangle. Well, yeah, it is. No. It's like you're asking like a married bachelor. It doesn't exist. Their triangle has to have all 3 to be a triangle. Christians are convinced that God, to be God, must have 3 persons. Just like a triangle, by definition, is triangle, 3-angle. By definition, Christians believe God is triune, Father, Son, and Spirit. By definition. It's not this is just how we think about it. Oh, Jesus grew up to be God. No. By definition, God equals triune, which means by definitions, do we agree or disagree with Muslims? We disagree. We fundamentally disagree. By definition, they're going to say Allah is not triune. Allah does not equal Trinity. That's sure. And you're all going to hell for saying that. That's exactly what they believe. We fundamentally disagree. Christians say, no, we fundamentally believe the Trinity. You can't take what equals. So what's a good example of this? Is water a good one? Let me ask this. Is water the best one? Water, ice, and vapor?
No, because it can't.
It's not the best one because?
Because it can only be one thing at a time.
Good. It can only be one thing at a time, one form, one mode at a time. And in Christianity, we call that historically modalism.
Yeah.
And now the creed said that's called heresy. Yeah, we don't do that because we can't have ice and vapor and water simultaneously. What about an egg? Is that the best idea?
No.
No. Why?
You boil it, fry it.
Boil and fry it. Yeah, that's right. So fry it,
Sorry.
freeze it. So it's three. Yeah, that's fine. It is three. There's three parts to a one. If a part you mean person, okay. But there's all inanimate objects. They're not none of those things have consciousness. In that
There's
sense.
the shell, the yolk, and the egg.
Yeah, so there's three things there. Yeah, I'm with you there. So I always tell people, yeah. So what's the best one probably? Anything we can think of that has a person with consciousness, a conscious center. You may go ancient and think of Cerberus, a three-headed dog. So it's one canine, one being. If I say, look, there's Cerberus. If someone says, look, there's Cerberus over there, Cerberus means that being is walking down the street. Cerberus. But if I said, oh, there comes Butch, and Butch is one of the heads. That's both true. There's Butch, and now on Butch, I'm focusing on one of the heads, one of the conscious. Oh, look, there comes the Father. There comes the Spirit. That's one of the heads, as it were. But the being, Cerberus, is coming this way. God is coming this way. One canine and three conscious, or like a conjoined twin. Imagine conjoined triplets. There's one being coming towards me, but each brain, as it were, or soul has a center of consciousness. So when you say person, what's another way of thinking person? This should people just let this sink in because everyone thinks person. They always think human. No, but person means what?
The example in here that seemed to make the most sense to me was the body and the soul.
Okay.
Because that's something I can relate to. I can visualize that. And the soul is within us, but it's operating. We don't even, it's transparent.
Okay, so the soul and body, the soul's
Unity
transparent.
with the body, though.
You do what with the body?
Unity.
Unity, that's right. They work perfectly together.
Yes.
It doesn't mean the body's perfect. It means, but yeah, the interrelationship.
But there's different functions. Is it right to say that the Trinity is three in one, three unified divine natures combined, but each has their own role?
Own role, yes. Historically, the church has said that had different roles. Yes, and that's okay. It is okay to say they have three different roles. And we see that through the biblical text, that there are times when the Godhead did different things at different times. For example, the Father didn't die on the cross. The Spirit didn't die on the cross. The Son died on the cross. That's a very particular role. The Son became incarnate. The Father didn't become incarnate. The Spirit didn't become incarnate. That's a different role, a different function. And what Christian thinkers are always trying to say is they would say, yes, you just can't say more than that. You can't say, and therefore they're different things or different beings or different characteristics. Different roles? Yeah, sure. You can say different roles, yep. Because only the Son was incarnated. Only the Son died on the cross for our sins. Yeah, very good. Very good. So anything that I say, three persons and one being. What is that? What is a person? How do we understand person? You mean they're all humans? When you say person, you mean human?
Divine being.
They're divine, not beings. That's Trinity. One more time, it's tritheism. So it's that. Okay, so they're divine. They're not human. So person doesn't mean. Everyone thinks this in normal vocabulary in English. When someone says the word person, we think human person. Everybody does, right? Oh, look, here comes a person right now. That's fine to be real nerdy, but in philosophy, no one does that. Person just means an individual center of consciousness who has agency. So you can have, and Christians just think the same thing. Angelic beings are persons. I mean, there might be aliens all over the universe. There's all persons. They're all persons. Just